The Bacteriophage Cure. In the 1920s and 1930s, bacteriophages, viruses that infect and kill bacteria, were developed as treatments for bacterial infections at the Eliava Institute in Tbilisi, Georgia. The therapy was remarkably successful, curing infections that were otherwise fatal, with success rates documented at over 90% for many bacterial diseases. Félix Derel, the French-Canadian scientist who discovered bacteriophages in 1917, traveled the world demonstrating phage therapy. He cured plague outbreaks in India, cholera epidemics in Southeast Asia, and dysentery outbreaks in multiple countries. Medical journals published hundreds of successful case studies. The treatment was simple. Identify the specific bacteria causing infection, find the natural virus that preys on that bacteria, and administer it to the patient. The bacteriophage would multiply inside the bacterial cells, destroying them from within, then disappear once all target bacteria were eliminated. No side effects, no resistance development, self-limiting treatment. In the Soviet Union, the Eliava Institute became a major research center, developing phage therapies for dozens of bacterial infections. The Soviet military used phage therapy extensively during World War II to treat infected wounds. Success rates were documented in military medical records. Infections that would require amputation in other armies were cured with phage treatment. Western medicine showed significant interest initially. Pharmaceutical companies in the United States and Europe began producing phage preparations. Eli Lilly, the major pharmaceutical company, manufactured and sold 7 different phage products in the 1930s and early 1940s. Then penicillin was discovered. The first mass-produced antibiotic could be manufactured in bulk, stored indefinitely, and used against multiple types of bacteria without identification. More importantly for pharmaceutical companies, it could be patented, standardized, and sold at controlled prices. Bacteriophages, by contrast, occur naturally and cannot be patented. Each infection requires identifying the specific bacteria and selecting the correct phage, a process requiring skilled microbiologists. Phages must be stored carefully and have limited shelf life. There was no way to create a profitable, standardized product. By 1950, phage therapy had virtually disappeared from Western medicine, despite its documented success. Research funding dried up. Medical schools stopped teaching about it. The FDA began requiring expensive clinical trials for approval, trials that no company would fund for unpatentable treatments. The Soviet Union continued phage research because their economic system didn't require treatments to be profitable. The Eliava Institute treated thousands of patients annually with continued high success rates. But Western medical literature ignored or dismissed this work, claiming Soviet research was unreliable. By the 1970s, antibiotic resistance was emerging as a serious problem. Bacteria were evolving resistance to drugs that had once cured them easily. Some infections became untreatable. Doctors began prescribing stronger antibiotics, creating resistant superbugs. A few Western researchers revisited phage therapy in the 1990s and 2000s. They found the old Soviet research was valid. Phages worked extremely well against antibiotic-resistant bacteria. Clinical trials in Belgium, Poland, and the United States confirmed success rates matching the historical data. But regulatory barriers remain enormous. The FDA approval process was designed for chemical drugs, not living viruses that evolve and must be customized to specific infections. Clinical trials would cost hundreds of millions of dollars. No pharmaceutical company will fund trials for treatments they cannot patent and profit from. Today, as antibiotic resistance threatens to return medicine to the pre-antibiotic era, phage therapy remains largely unavailable in Western countries, except through compassionate use exemptions for patients with no other options. The treatment that worked brilliantly 100 years ago was abandoned not because it failed, but because it succeeded in ways that weren't profitable. The hemp plastic revolution. In the 1930s and 1940s, Henry Ford and his engineers at Ford Motor Company developed automobile body panels made from hemp-based plastic. The material was stronger than steel, lighter than fiberglass, completely biodegradable, and could be produced from annually renewable crops. Ford's Hemp car was demonstrated in 1941. The body panels were made from hemp fiber mixed with other plant materials in a resin binder. Ford himself swung a sledgehammer at the trunk panel to demonstrate its strength. The hammer bounced off without denting the panel. Film footage of this demonstration still exists. The hemp plastic was the result of years of agricultural and materials research. Ford had long advocated for agricultural products replacing petroleum-based materials. His vision was cars that farmers could help produce, growing the crops that would be processed into fuel, plastics, and other materials. Laboratory testing showed the hemp panels were actually superior to steel in many ways. They were 10 times stronger in impact resistance. They didn't rust or corrode. They weighed far less, improving fuel efficiency. Most remarkably, they would biodegrade completely at the end of the vehicle's life, unlike metal or petroleum plastics. The production process was also cleaner than steel manufacturing. Hemp grows rapidly without pesticides, actually improving soil quality. Processing hemp fiber into plastic required far less energy than smelting steel. The entire life cycle from growing to disposal was environmentally superior. Ford was preparing to transition automobile production to hemp-based materials. He had purchased land for hemp cultivation. Other manufacturers were watching with interest. The implications for agriculture and manufacturing were enormous. Renewable materials replacing finite resources, farmers gaining a valuable cash crop, reduced pollution and waste. Then in 1937, the Marijuana Tax Act effectively banned hemp cultivation in the United States. The law made no distinction between hemp, low-THC industrial cannabis, and marijuana, high-THC drug cannabis. Growing hemp became legally and economically impossible due to prohibitive taxes and regulations. Ford was forced to abandon hemp plastic development. Without a domestic hemp supply, production was impossible. Imported hemp was prohibitively expensive. The entire research program was shut down. By 1942, as World War II demanded steel for military production, civilian automotive innovation stopped entirely. After the war, petroleum-based plastics dominated. Chemical companies had developed manufacturing processes for plastics from oil byproducts. These plastics could be patented, and the raw materials were controlled by oil companies. A vertically integrated industry emerged. Oil companies selling feedstock to chemical companies, selling plastics to manufacturers. Hemp plastic would have disrupted this entire system. Farmers growing feedstock would break the oil companies' control of raw materials. Biodegradable plastics would eliminate the waste stream that created demand for new plastic products. A material that worked too well and lasted exactly long enough was incompatible with an industry built on planned obsolescence. Modern research has rediscovered hemp plastic. Small companies produce it in countries where hemp is legal. Tests confirm it has all the advantages Ford's engineers documented 80 years ago. But it remains a niche product, far more expensive than petroleum plastics due to lack of scale and continued legal restrictions in many areas. The hemp car demonstrated that plant-based materials could replace petroleum products successfully. The experiment worked perfectly. That's exactly why it had to be stopped. The miracle tree solution. In the 1970s and 1980s, researchers studying malnutrition in developing countries identified Moringa oleifera, the miracle tree, as a potential solution to vitamin deficiency and hunger. The tree grows rapidly in tropical climates, requires minimal water, and produces leaves with higher nutritional content than almost any other plant. Analysis of moringa leaves showed they contained 7 times the vitamin C of oranges, 4 times the calcium of milk, 4 times the vitamin A of carrots, 3 times the potassium of bananas, and significant amounts of protein, iron, and other nutrients. A person eating small amounts of moringa leaves daily could meet all basic nutritional requirements. Organizations including the World Health Organization and various universities conducted extensive field trials. In Niger, children suffering from severe malnutrition were fed moringa leaf powder. Results were dramatic. Children recovered from malnutrition in weeks, gaining weight and showing improved health markers faster than with standard supplementation programs. The tree had additional remarkable properties. Its seeds could purify water. Crushed moringa seeds added to dirty water would cause contaminants to clump together and settle, producing clean drinking water without chemicals or filtration. Villages using moringa seed water purification reported dramatic reductions in waterborne diseases. Moringa could also be used for livestock feed, improving animal health and milk production. The tree's wood could be harvested for fuel without killing the tree. Oil pressed from seeds had industrial applications. Every part of the tree had practical uses, and it grew so rapidly that a single tree could produce substantial yields within months of planting. Multiple aid organizations began promoting moringa cultivation in Africa and Asia. They distributed seeds, taught cultivation techniques, and showed communities how to prepare moringa leaves for food. Success stories emerged from dozens of countries, villages becoming nutritionally self-sufficient, child mortality dropping, health improving dramatically. Then major agricultural companies and supplement manufacturers became involved. They saw moringa as a profitable product. Dried leaf powder could be sold in Western health food markets as a superfood supplement at premium prices. Patents were filed on processing methods, extraction techniques, and specific preparations. But there was a problem. Moringa works too well when grown locally. Villages growing their own moringa trees became nutritionally independent. They didn't need fortified foods, vitamin supplements, or nutritional aid programs. This threatened the entire foreign aid industry and the markets for nutritional products. Funding for moringa promotion programs was gradually reduced. Aid organizations shifted focus to other interventions. Research grants for moringa studies dried up. The World Health Organization reduced its promotion of moringa despite the documented successes. Simultaneously, regulatory barriers appeared. Some countries banned import of moringa seed or restricted cultivation, citing invasive species concerns, despite moringa having been grown in those regions for centuries. Others required expensive certification for moringa products, making small-scale production economically impossible. The tree still grows throughout the tropics. Local populations continue using it, but the large-scale programs to promote moringa cultivation for nutritional security were quietly discontinued. The solution that worked too well, making people nutritionally independent at essentially no cost, was incompatible with systems built on ongoing dependency and commercial products. Today, moringa is sold as an expensive superfood supplement in wealthy countries while remaining underutilized in regions where malnutrition persists. The experiment proved that simple, local solutions could solve major nutritional problems. That success was precisely why it couldn't be allowed to scale. The self-repairing concrete. In 2006, microbiologist Henk Jonkers at Delft University of Technology in the Netherlands developed bioconcrete, concrete embedded with bacteria that could repair its own cracks. The implications for infrastructure were revolutionary: buildings and bridges that heal themselves, lasting hundreds of years without maintenance. The bacteria used were Bacillus pseudophirmis, chosen because they can survive dormant in concrete for decades. Jonkers embedded the bacteria in capsules, along with calcium lactate nutrient source. When cracks form in the concrete and water seeps in, the dormant bacteria activate, consume the nutrients, and produce limestone, calcium carbonate, that fills the cracks. Laboratory tests were remarkable. Bioconcrete samples were deliberately cracked, then exposed to water. Within 3 weeks, the cracks were completely filled with new limestone. The material had healed itself. Testing showed the repaired concrete was as strong as the original, sometimes stronger, because the biological limestone formed a very dense crystalline structure. Field trials were conducted on actual infrastructure. A parking garage in the Netherlands was built with bioconcrete in some sections. After several years, conventional concrete sections showed typical crack development and deterioration. Bioconcrete sections remained crack-free or showed cracks that had sealed themselves. The economic implications were staggering. Infrastructure deterioration costs billions annually. Bridges require constant inspection and repair. Buildings need maintenance. Concrete has a functional lifespan, measured in decades before it must be replaced. Bioconcrete could potentially last centuries with minimal maintenance. Environmental benefits were equally impressive. Concrete production creates about 8% of global CO2 emissions. If concrete structures lasted 10 times longer, the environmental impact of construction would drop dramatically. Resources spent on constant repair and replacement could be redirected. Major construction companies showed interest. Trials were expanded. Bioconcrete was used in several high-profile projects. Research papers documented the success. Jonkers received awards for the innovation. Commercial production seemed imminent. Then obstacles appeared. Bioconcrete costs approximately twice as much as conventional concrete initially, though life cycle costs are far lower. Construction companies bidding on projects found that despite lower lifetime costs, initial price made their bids less competitive. Lowest bid contracts went to conventional concrete. More significantly, the entire construction and maintenance industry is built around ongoing repairs. Inspection companies, repair contractors, and material suppliers depend on concrete deteriorating on predictable schedules. Concrete that lasts indefinitely eliminates massive ongoing revenue streams. Cement manufacturers also had concerns. If each ton of concrete lasts 10 times longer, cement demand drops proportionally. An industry built on continuous replacement faces contraction if products become truly durable. Regulatory barriers emerged. Building codes in many jurisdictions don't account for self-healing materials. Approval processes for new construction materials are expensive and slow. Insurance and liability issues arose. If a building is expected to last 200 years, who bears responsibility for its condition? By 2015, despite successful trials and proven technology, bioconcrete remained a niche product used in specialty applications. It was available but not widely adopted. The construction industry continued using conventional concrete that requires constant maintenance. Jonkers continues his research, and some bioconcrete is produced commercially, but adoption is far below what the technology's success would suggest. A material that works too well, lasting centuries instead of decades, is fundamentally incompatible with an industry built on planned obsolescence and ongoing maintenance contracts. The experiment succeeded completely. Infrastructure that heals itself is achievable. That's precisely why it threatens the existing system. The soil remineralization discovery. In the 1930s, Julius Hensel, a German chemist, discovered that adding finely ground rock dust to depleted agricultural soil could restore fertility without chemical fertilizers, producing dramatically increased yields with improved nutritional content. His research showed that mineral-depleted soils were the primary cause of crop failures and nutritional deficiencies. Hensel's experiments demonstrated that rock dust containing a broad spectrum of minerals allowed plants to thrive even in exhausted soils. Crops grown in remineralized soil showed resistance to pests and diseases without pesticides. Yields increased substantially, in some cases doubling or tripling. Most remarkably, nutritional analysis showed that produce from remineralized soil contained significantly higher mineral and vitamin content. The theory was simple. Modern agriculture depletes soil minerals faster than natural processes can replace them. Chemical fertilizers, NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, address only 3 nutrients while plants require dozens of minerals for optimal health. Rock dust provides the full spectrum of minerals that natural weathering would supply over centuries. Hensel published his findings in a book called Bread from Stones in 1894. The work documented specific mineral ratios in healthy versus depleted soils, yield comparisons between remineralized and conventional fields, and nutritional analyses showing superior food quality from remineralized soil. Agricultural institutes in Germany and other European countries conducted trials confirming Hensel's findings. Fields remineralized with basalt or granite dust showed remarkable improvements. Farmers reported not just higher yields, but crops that were more resistant to drought, frost, pests, and disease. The plants were fundamentally healthier. The method was extraordinarily cheap. Rock dust was a waste product from quarrying operations. Crushed rock screened out during gravel production. It cost almost nothing. Application was simple, spread on fields like any other soil amendment. The benefits lasted years because minerals don't wash away like water-soluble fertilizers. Chemical fertilizer companies immediately recognized the threat. If farmers could restore soil fertility with waste rock dust, the market for expensive synthetic fertilizers would collapse. NPK fertilizers were becoming a major industry with substantial profit margins. Rock dust threatened this entire business model. Academic opposition emerged. Agricultural scientists working at universities, often funded by chemical companies, published papers questioning rock dust effectiveness. They argued that minerals in rock dust weren't plant available, locked in crystalline structures that plants couldn't access. They claimed the successes were coincidental or due to other factors. Yet, farmer experience contradicted this. Those who used rock dust reported consistent improvements. Comparative yields were measurable and dramatic. Soil analysis showed mineral content increasing over time as microorganisms and weathering broke down the rock particles, releasing minerals gradually. Hensel died in 1903, and interest in his work faded as chemical agriculture expanded in the early 20th century. The simplicity and cheapness of rock remineralization couldn't compete with the marketing power of chemical companies promoting scientifically formulated fertilizers. By the 1950s, rock dust remineralization had been almost completely forgotten in mainstream agriculture. Chemical fertilizers dominated. Soil depletion became accepted as normal, requiring ever-increasing fertilizer applications to maintain yields. The nutritional content of food dropped measurably. Studies comparing 1940s produce to 1990s produce showed significant declines in vitamins and minerals. Some organic farmers rediscovered rock dust in the 1970s and 1980s. Modern trials in Scotland, Australia, and North America confirmed Hensel's findings. Fields amended with rock dust showed all the benefits he had documented a century earlier. But mainstream agriculture remained committed to chemical fertilizers. The method that could restore soil fertility cheaply and sustainably was incompatible with an agricultural system built on selling expensive inputs. Rock dust worked too well at too low a cost. The experiment succeeded, and that success was why it had to be forgotten. The ocean thermal energy shutdown. In the 1970s and early 1980s, Jacques-Arsène d'Arsonval's concept of ocean thermal energy conversion, OTEC, was successfully demonstrated at scale, showing that temperature differences in ocean water could generate unlimited clean electricity. The technology worked, pilot plants operated successfully, and then funding was terminated. OTEC works on a simple principle. Warm surface water and cold deep water have a temperature difference of about 20 degrees Celsius in tropical oceans. This difference can drive a heat engine using ammonia or other fluids with low boiling points. Warm water vaporizes the working fluid, driving a turbine. Then cold water from the deep ocean condenses it back to liquid, completing the cycle. In 1979, the Natural Energy Laboratory of Hawaii successfully operated Mini OTEC, the first closed-cycle OTEC plant to produce net power. The small plant generated 50 kilowatts gross with 10-15 kilowatts net after accounting for parasitic loads. The experiment proved the concept worked at sea. In 1980, a larger experiment on the island of Nauru produced 120 kilowatts. Engineers documented consistent, reliable operation. The ocean provided an inexhaustible heat source. The system ran continuously day and night, regardless of weather. Unlike solar or wind, OTEC offered true baseload power generation. Studies showed that large-scale OTEC plants could produce electricity at costs competitive with fossil fuels. A single large OTEC plant could generate 100-plus megawatts continuously. Floating OTEC platforms could be positioned throughout tropical oceans, generating power transmitted via undersea cables or used on-site to produce hydrogen fuel or desalinate water. The environmental impact was negligible. No fuel combustion, no emissions, no waste products. The cold water brought from depth actually provided nutrients that enhanced local marine productivity. OTEC plants could simultaneously generate power, produce fresh water, and support aquaculture. The U.S. Department of Energy funded extensive OTEC research through the early 1980s. Multiple designs were tested, economics were analyzed, technical challenges were identified and solved. By 1983, the technology was ready for commercial development. Several energy companies expressed interest in building large-scale plants. Then suddenly, in 1984, funding was slashed. OTEC research budget dropped from $30 million to less than $2 million. Pilot plants were shut down. Research staff was laid off. The program effectively ended. Official explanations cited budget constraints and competing priorities. But the timing was suspicious. OTEC funding was cut just as the technology was transitioning from experimental to commercial viability. The research had succeeded in proving the concept worked and could be scaled economically. Analysis of the politics suggests several factors. Fossil fuel interests recognized OTEC as a genuine threat. Unlimited clean energy from tropical oceans could replace coal and natural gas for baseload power. Electric utilities opposed technology that could enable distributed power generation, bypassing their centralized grid infrastructure. Some research continued with limited funding, but without support for commercial-scale demonstrations, OTEC remained in research limbo. Japan continued some OTEC development, building small experimental plants. India and Taiwan conducted studies, but no country committed to large-scale deployment. By 2000, OTEC had been virtually forgotten in energy discussions, despite its proven effectiveness. Billions were invested in solar and wind, intermittent sources requiring battery storage or backup generation, while the technology for continuous clean ocean power sat unused. The experiment succeeded completely. OTEC works, provides reliable baseload power, and has minimal environmental impact. Those successes made it too threatening to industries built on fuel scarcity and centralized distribution. The better it worked, the more important it became to prevent its deployment. The cancer immunotherapy suppression. In the 1960s, Dr. William Coley's immunotherapy approach to cancer, using bacterial toxins to stimulate the immune system to fight tumors, showed remarkable success rates but was suppressed in favor of radiation and chemotherapy, despite Coley's toxins producing better outcomes in some cancer types. Actually, this was Coley's work from the 1890s, 1930s. But in the 1960s, his daughter Helen Coley Nautz established the Cancer Research Institute and compiled comprehensive data on her father's work. Her analysis of over 1,000 cases showed that Coley's toxins had achieved complete remission in approximately 500 patients with various cancers, including some considered terminal. The treatment involved injecting heat-killed bacteria, Streptococcus pyogenes and Serratia marcescens, directly into tumors. The bacterial toxins triggered powerful immune responses. Patients developed high fevers, and their immune systems, activated by the perceived infection, attacked the cancer cells along with the bacteria. For soft tissue sarcomas, Coley's toxins showed superior results to surgery or radiation. Long-term survival rates exceeded 50% for patients treated with toxins, compared to under 20% for conventional treatments. Testimonials from cured patients documented decades of cancer-free survival. The treatment was used successfully from the 1890s through the 1930s at Memorial Hospital in New York and other institutions. Medical journals published case studies. Surgeons observed tumors shrinking after toxin treatment. The success was documented and reproducible. Then radiation therapy was developed in the 1930s and 1940s, followed by chemotherapy in the 1950s. These became standard cancer treatments. They had important advantages. They could be standardized, administered on fixed schedules, and most importantly, patented and sold for profit. Coley's toxins required skilled medical management. Dosing had to be adjusted based on each patient's response. Treatment continued until tumors regressed, and close monitoring was essential. This individualized approach was incompatible with assembly line medical practice and difficult to monetize at scale. The American Medical Association and medical establishment increasingly favored treatments that could be standardized and taught uniformly. Radiation dosing could be calculated mathematically. Chemotherapy followed specific protocols. Immunotherapy using bacterial toxins required clinical judgment and experience. By 1960, Coley's toxins had essentially disappeared from oncology despite Helen Coley Nautz's efforts to preserve the research. Medical schools stopped teaching about immunotherapy. Oncologists trained exclusively in surgery, radiation, and chemotherapy had never heard of Coley's work. Pharmaceutical companies weren't interested. The bacterial preparations couldn't be patented, and the individual treatment approach didn't scale profitably. Hospitals found radiation and chemotherapy easier to administer and more lucrative. Standardized protocols meant more patients could be treated with less specialized staff. When modern immunotherapy emerged in the 1990s and 2000s, using checkpoint inhibitors and CAR T cells, researchers gradually rediscovered that Coley had been right a century earlier. Stimulating the immune system could cure cancer. Modern immunotherapy has become a billion-dollar industry with patentable drugs and protocols. But Coley's original approach, which worked successfully for decades, remains largely unused. The bacterial toxins are difficult to obtain, not FDA approved for cancer treatment despite historical success, and still not profitable enough to justify expensive clinical trials. The treatment succeeded and documented impressive cure rates. That success threatened an emerging cancer industry built on expensive technologies. An effective treatment that couldn't be monopolized had to be replaced with patentable alternatives, even if they weren't more effective. The graphene water filter. In 2012, researchers at MIT demonstrated that graphene oxide membranes could filter water with near-perfect efficiency, removing all contaminants including viruses and dissolved salts, while requiring far less pressure than conventional reverse osmosis. The technology could provide unlimited clean water at a fraction of current costs. Graphene, a single layer of carbon atoms arranged in a hexagonal lattice, has unique properties. Water molecules can pass through tiny pores in graphene sheets, while virtually all contaminants are blocked. The membrane is only 1 atom thick, meaning water flows through rapidly with minimal pressure. Laboratory tests showed the graphene membranes removing 97% of dissolved salts from seawater in a single pass. Bacteria and viruses were completely blocked. Heavy metals, chemicals, and other contaminants were filtered out. The result was ultra-pure water from any source: ocean, river, wastewater, or industrial runoff. The energy requirements were remarkable. Conventional reverse osmosis desalination requires 3-4 kilowatt-hours per cubic meter of water, produced because forcing water through thick polymer membranes demands high pressure. Graphene membranes needed only a fraction of that pressure because water flows through atomic-scale pores rather than thick polymer matrix. Cost analysis showed graphene filtration could produce drinking water for pennies per 1,000 gallons. Desalination could finally become economical for agriculture, not just drinking water. Regions facing water scarcity could access unlimited clean water from oceans or polluted sources. The implications were revolutionary. Water scarcity drives conflicts, migration, and humanitarian crises globally. A technology that could provide unlimited clean water cheaply would transform geopolitics. Coastal deserts could become agricultural land. Contaminated water sources could be safely used. Waterborne diseases could be virtually eliminated. Major water technology companies showed interest. Pilot projects were funded. Academic research accelerated. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation provided grants for development. It appeared graphene water filtration would rapidly move from laboratory to commercial deployment. Then progress stalled. The graphene membranes worked perfectly in laboratory conditions, but faced challenges in real-world deployment. Scaling production of defect-free graphene at industrial scales proved difficult. Long-term durability testing showed that some membranes degraded faster than expected under continuous use. But these were engineering challenges, not fundamental barriers. Industries routinely solve such problems when sufficient investment is applied. Yet, funding for graphene water filtration research diminished rather than increased. Pilot projects were delayed indefinitely. Companies developing the technology shifted focus to other applications of graphene. Analysis suggests several factors. Existing water infrastructure represents trillions in invested capital. Utility companies profit from water scarcity. Prices rise as supply tightens. Desalination plants using conventional technology require expensive facilities and ongoing energy costs, creating profitable long-term contracts. A filter technology that works too well threatens this system. If individuals can purify any water source with a graphene membrane powered by a hand pump or small solar panel, centralized water infrastructure becomes unnecessary. Regions become water independent. The scarcity model that makes water valuable and controllable disappears. Additionally, industries that profit from water pollution have incentives to prevent cheap purification. If contaminated water can be easily cleaned, regulatory pressure to prevent pollution weakens. Companies can externalize environmental costs if filtration is cheap enough to address contamination after it occurs. Graphene water filtration research continues at universities, but commercial development has slowed dramatically. The technology that could solve global water crises remains largely in laboratories. It worked too well, solved problems too thoroughly, and threatened too many existing interests. The experiment succeeded in producing nearly perfect water filtration at low cost. That success is precisely why it couldn't be allowed to reach deployment. The Thorium Reactor Shutdown. In the 1960s and early 1970s, Oak Ridge National Laboratory operated the Molten Salt Reactor Experiment, MSRE, successfully demonstrating that thorium-based nuclear reactors could generate power safely, produce minimal waste, and couldn't cause meltdowns. The technology worked perfectly, then was abandoned for reasons having nothing to do with technical performance. The MSRE used liquid fluoride salt, containing dissolved thorium and uranium, as both fuel and coolant. The reactor operated at atmospheric pressure, couldn't experience steam explosions or meltdowns, consumed over 99% of its fuel versus 1 to 3% for conventional reactors, and produced waste that was dangerous for hundreds of years instead of tens of thousands. The reactor operated successfully from 1965 to 1969, demonstrating all the theoretical advantages of molten salt thorium technology. It ran at various power levels, was shut down and restarted repeatedly, changed fuel compositions, and never experienced any significant safety incident. Engineers confirmed the design was inherently safe. If anything went wrong, the salt would drain into tanks where the reaction would stop automatically. Thorium is 3 times more abundant than uranium and widely distributed globally. No nation has a monopoly. Thorium reactors cannot produce weapons-grade plutonium, making nuclear proliferation virtually impossible. The waste products decay to background radiation levels in 300–500 years instead of 10,000–100,000 years for conventional nuclear waste. Economics were favorable too. Thorium reactors could be smaller and simpler than conventional plants because they operated at low pressure and high temperature, allowing higher thermal efficiency. Fuel costs would be minimal since thorium is abundant and the reactors extract far more energy per unit of fuel. After the successful demonstration, Oak Ridge engineers proposed scaling up to commercial thorium reactors. They had solved the technical challenges, proven the concept, and designed next-generation plants. The technology was ready for deployment. Then, in 1973, the Atomic Energy Commission terminated the thorium reactor program. Funding was redirected to conventional light water reactors and breeder reactors that could produce plutonium for weapons. The MSRE was shut down, and research into molten salt thorium reactors effectively ended. The official explanation was budget constraints and focus on technologies closer to commercial deployment. But the real reason was strategic. Thorium reactors didn't produce plutonium for nuclear weapons. The entire nuclear industry had developed around dual-use technology that served both civilian power and military weapons programs. Conventional uranium reactors produce plutonium as a waste product that could be reprocessed for weapons. This dual use justified government subsidies, accelerated development, and created infrastructure useful for weapons programs. Thorium reactors offered no such military application. Additionally, the nuclear industry had invested billions in uranium fuel cycle infrastructure, mining, enrichment, fuel fabrication, and waste management. Switching to thorium would make these investments worthless. Companies with patents and facilities for uranium technology oppose competing approaches. For decades, thorium reactor technology was virtually forgotten. China and India have recently revived research because they have large thorium reserves and want energy independence. But Western nations continue focusing on conventional nuclear technology despite its inferior performance. The experiment succeeded completely. Thorium reactors worked better than conventional nuclear power in every measurable way: safer, cheaper fuel, less waste, no weapons proliferation. Those advantages were exactly why the technology had to be suppressed. Success threatened both military interests and existing commercial investments. The pneumatic tube transport system. In the 1960s and 1970s, localized pneumatic tube systems were successfully demonstrated that could transport people and cargo at speeds exceeding 400 miles per hour through underground vacuum tubes, faster than airplanes, but using far less energy. The technology worked flawlessly in tests, then was defunded and forgotten. The concept builds on pneumatic systems used for decades to move mail and small packages through tubes in buildings and cities. Scaled up, capsules carrying people could move through tubes where air pressure is reduced, minimizing resistance. Linear electric motors provide acceleration and braking without moving parts or friction. In 1969, a prototype pneumatic transport system, operated by Lockheed, successfully moved capsules carrying human passengers through test tubes at 265 miles per hour. The ride was smooth, acceleration was gentle at 0.5 g, and the system operated quietly and safely. Engineers calculated that optimized systems could reach 500 plus mists. The advantages were significant. Underground tubes protected from weather allowed year-round operation at consistent speeds. Energy efficiency was remarkable. Reduced air pressure meant minimal drag, and electric motors captured braking energy for reuse. Cost per mile traveled was projected far below automobiles or airlines. Urban applications were especially promising. A pneumatic system could move people from city centers to suburbs in minutes, operating every few seconds like elevators. No waiting for scheduled trains or flights, no traffic congestion, and no emissions. Studies showed that such systems could eliminate most commuter automobile traffic. The Department of Transportation funded extensive research. Routes were planned. Cost-benefit analyses showed positive returns. Technology companies developed components. Several cities expressed interest in pilot installations. Then in 1975, federal funding for pneumatic transport research was eliminated. The stated reason was budgetary. Other priorities required the funding. But the timing was suspicious. Research was terminated just as the technology was ready to transition from experimental to operational. Analysis reveals that pneumatic transport threatened multiple powerful industries. Automobile manufacturers recognized that efficient urban tube transport would reduce car dependency. Oil companies saw a threat to gasoline sales. Airlines opposed technology that could replace short and medium-haul flights. Highway construction companies would lose contracts if new road building decreased. Real estate interests also opposed pneumatic systems. Urban land values are partly determined by transportation access. Pneumatic tubes could make distant locations as accessible as city centers, disrupting existing real estate valuations and development patterns. Property owners near existing transportation hubs didn't want their location advantages eliminated. Labor unions representing transit workers opposed automation. Pneumatic systems required minimal staffing, no drivers, small maintenance teams, compared to conventional transit. This threatened union membership and political influence. The technology still exists conceptually. Elon Musk's Hyperloop proposal revived the basic idea in 2013, though with magnetic levitation added. But over 40 years after successful demonstrations, no operational system exists. The engineering challenges were solved in the 1970s. The barriers are political and economic. A transport system that worked too well, fast, cheap, efficient, and accessible, threatened too many industries built on transportation being expensive, slow, and limited. The experiment succeeded technically, and that success guaranteed it would be suppressed. 10 experiments that worked. 10 technologies that succeeded in controlled demonstrations proved their value in testing and showed potential to transform their fields. 10 innovations that were stopped, defunded, forgotten, or buried, not because they failed, but because they threatened the wrong interests. Bacteriophage therapy cured infections perfectly, then was abandoned for patentable antibiotics. Hemp plastic outperformed steel, then was banned by marijuana laws. Moringa trees solved malnutrition, then aid programs stopped promoting them. Self-healing concrete lasted centuries, then construction industries chose planned obsolescence. Rock dust restored soil fertility cheaply. Then chemical fertilizer companies buried the research. Ocean thermal energy provided unlimited clean power. Then funding vanished as it approached commercial viability. Coley's immunotherapy cured cancer, then was replaced with more profitable radiation and chemo. Graphene filters purified any water source, then development stalled before deployment. Thorium reactors proved safer than uranium, then were abandoned because they didn't make weapons. Pneumatic tubes moved people faster than planes, then transport industries killed the funding. Each technology succeeded on its technical merits. Each solved real problems effectively. Each threatened powerful industries or systems built on scarcity, ongoing consumption, or centralized control. We can debate the specifics of each case. Some technical challenges remain unsolved. Some economic barriers are real. But the pattern is undeniable. Technologies that work too well face opposition proportional to how thoroughly they solve problems. A cancer cure that's too cheap. Water purification that's too effective. Transportation that's too efficient. Materials that last too long. Energy that's too abundant. Food that's too nutritious. Soil that's too fertile. These aren't failures of science. They're failures of systems that profit from problems persisting. An invention that completely solves a problem eliminates the market for partial solutions. A technology that makes something abundant destroys industries built on artificial scarcity. The experiments worked. They were stopped anyway. And that raises the disturbing question. How much progress has been deliberately prevented not because it's impossible, but because it would work too well?